That night unfolded in a way I never could have anticipated. The emotions I experienced were directed not toward my husband, but my son. It was an evening of overwhelming intensity, both unsettling and exhilarating. The night began as any other, peaceful and uneventful in our home. After dinner, the house settled into its usual nighttime rhythm. The faint hum of the dishwasher in the kitchen, the soft creaks of the wooden floors adjusting. I had no inkling that this night would irrevocably reshape my understanding of my family, my life, and myself. My name is Amanda, and until recently, I believed I had everything figured out. At 42, I am a hard-working woman who has built a simple yet fulfilling life. My husband, Charles, and I have been married for 18 years. While our relationship has had its ups and downs, I always considered us steady. We have two children, our daughter Sierra, who is away at college, and our 19-year-old son David, who still lives with us while attending community college. David has always been the quieter of the two. Charles and I often joked that he was the calm to Sierra's storm. She was full of energy and passion, while David preferred solitude, often retreating into books or his latest hobby. Over the years, I sometimes worried he might be overshadowed by his sister or even by us, his parents. But whenever I expressed concern, he would smile reassuringly and insist he was fine. However, as time passed, I noticed small changes in him. He became more withdrawn, his usual quiet smiles turning into fleeting expressions. Sometimes, I caught him watching me with an unreadable look. Curious, searching. I dismissed it as teenage awkwardness and thought little of it. Charles had been away for several days on one of his frequent business trips. His work kept him busy, often requiring him to travel for meetings and conferences. This was nothing new, and I had long since adjusted to managing things in his absence. With Sierra preoccupied with her studies, it was just David and me in the house. The first evening after Charles left, David seemed quieter than usual. We ate dinner together, and I tried to spark a conversation by asking about his classes and the 3D model he had been printing for weeks. He responded politely but briefly, his eyes flickering to mine before quickly looking away, as if something was weighing on him. "Are you all right?" I asked, frowning. "You seem a little quiet tonight." He gave me a small smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired, I guess." I chose not to press him. David had always been reserved, and I assumed he would open up if something was truly wrong. Instead, I let it go and went to bed, following my usual nighttime routine. As I lay there, I became aware of how empty Charles's side of the bed felt. I missed the comfort of his presence, the warmth of his body beside mine, the soft murmur of his voice as he drifted to sleep. I turned off the lights, closed my eyes, and allowed the familiar sounds of the house to lull me into slumber. In the middle of the night, I woke to the faint creak of my bedroom door opening. My heart pounded as I peered into the darkness. The room was silent except for the sound of my own breathing and the subtle rustling of fabric as someone moved closer. "Charles?" I mumbled sleepily, assuming he had returned home early to surprise me. No response. The mattress dipped slightly as someone sat on the edge of the bed. My groggy mind struggled to make sense of what was happening. Then, before I was fully awake, I felt a gentle hand rest on my thigh. Charles often reached for my arm or leg in a familiar, grounding gesture, a way of silently letting me know he was there. But something about this touch felt different, hesitant, unfamiliar, as if the person was imitating a movement but lacked confidence in it. I opened my eyes, adjusting to the faint glow of moonlight filtering through the blinds. What I saw made my breath catch. It wasn't Charles, it was David. "David?" I said, my voice laced with confusion and unease. "What are you doing?" He didn't move, his hand still resting lightly on my arm. Shadows partially obscured his face, but I could see the anxiety in his eyes. His lips parted slightly as if he wanted to say something, but no words came out. "Are you okay?" I asked, sitting up as my pulse quickened. I could feel the warmth of his fingers through the fabric of my nightshirt. I didn't mean to wake you," he murmured, his voice barely audible. I furrowed my brows, my confusion deepening. "Why are you here?" He hesitated, withdrawing his hand and lowering his gaze to the floor. "I don't know. he admitted quietly. I just wanted to check on you. I stared at him, uncertain of how to respond. His vulnerable, uncertain expression sent a pang through my chest. I'm fine, David, I said softly, but you should be in bed, it's late. He remained motionless for a few moments before finally standing, his shoulders slumped. Sorry, I'll go. As he turned to leave, something inside me urged me to stop him. I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the defeated look on his face or the strange sense of guilt that churned in my stomach. But I let him go, watching as he disappeared through the doorway. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling, unsettled by the night's events. As my mind raced, I struggled to make sense of it all. What had just happened? Why had he entered my room so suddenly? What was it about the encounter that left me feeling so unsettled? Yet, the most astonishing part was that it wasn't over. No, this story was far from finished, not yet. The next morning I woke earlier than usual. Sleep had been elusive after David's unexpected visit, my thoughts refusing to quiet. Each time I closed my eyes, I replayed the scene. His posture on the bed, the uncertainty in his voice, the lingering touch of his hand as if he wasn't sure if it belonged there. It was unsettling, though not in the way I had anticipated. Pushing the thoughts aside, I prepared for the day. When I went downstairs, David was already at the table sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone. He glanced up as I entered, his expression unreadable, but there was a new stiffness in his posture that hadn't been there before. Good morning, I greeted, trying to keep my voice light. You're up early? Yeah, he replied quietly. Had trouble sleeping? I asked, pausing before pouring myself a cup of coffee and sitting across from him. David, about last night. I'm sorry, he interrupted, his tone sharper than I expected. I didn't mean to startle you. I shouldn't have come into your room. It's okay, I said quickly. I was just worried about you. You seemed upset. He shrugged, turning his attention back to his phone. It's nothing, just forget about it. But I couldn't forget. The way he had looked at me, the way his hand had rested on my arm. It had felt too deliberate, too significant to dismiss as nothing. And strangely, I had felt something too. I couldn't quite define it, but I sensed he had as well. I wanted to press him for more, to understand what was going through his mind, but his body language told me not to. So I let it go for now. The rest of the day passed without incident. David stayed in his room most of the time while I kept myself busy with chores and errands, trying to shake the lingering unease. By evening, I was exhausted and ready to sleep. I pushed thoughts of the previous night aside as I curled beneath the blankets, though my mind remained restless. Why had David come to my room like that? Was something troubling him? Or was there another explanation? One I wasn't ready to acknowledge? Eventually, I must have drifted off because the next thing I knew, I was waking to the sound of the door creaking open again. My heart pounded as I sat up, peering into the darkness. Charles, I whispered, even though I knew it wasn't him. The figure in the doorway hesitated before stepping inside. The moonlight revealed David's familiar silhouette. My pulse quickened, a mixture of confusion and something else I couldn't name. It felt like the same moment replaying itself, like a dream I couldn't wake from. David, I said, my voice edged with both concern and frustration. What are you doing? Why are you here again? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked toward the bed and sat down at the edge, just as he had the night before. He wore a loose t-shirt and sweatpants, his hair tousled from sleep, his posture carrying a vulnerability that struck me deeply. I'm sorry, he murmured, eyes cast downward. I know this is weird. I didn't want to be alone. Why? I asked, my voice softer now. What's wrong? You can talk to me. He hesitated, his fingers tugging at the hem of his shirt. I don't know, he admitted. It's just, Dad's gone. Sierra's not here. The house feels too empty. I just wanted to be near someone. His words hit me harder than I expected. I had been so wrapped up in my own loneliness since Charles left that I hadn't considered how it might be affecting David. He had always been reserved. Maybe this was his way of dealing with the same emotions I had been struggling with. It's okay, I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. You're not alone, David. I'm here. He looked at me then, his eyes searching mine, and for a moment there was an odd tension in the air. I squeezed his shoulder reassuringly and smiled, hoping to ease the moment. "Come here," I said, patting the bed beside me. "If it helps, you can stay for a bit. But only if you promise to actually sleep, all right?" I wasn't sure why I said it, but I felt reluctant to sleep alone too. He nodded, a small, relieved smile crossing his face. "Thanks, Mom." David lay down on the other side of the bed, keeping a respectful distance. I turned off the light and shut my eyes, trying to ignore the strange mix of emotions swirling inside me. The room was quiet except for the soft rhythm of our breathing, and his presence beside me felt steady, reassuring. Eventually I drifted off, though my sleep was anything but peaceful. Sometime later I woke again, my senses heightened. At first I wasn't sure what had disturbed me. Then I felt it, a soft, hesitant touch on my arm. I murmured, my voice rough with sleep. He didn't say anything, though his hand lingered, grazing my skin lightly. The gesture was so gentle, so deliberate, that it momentarily stole my breath. My mind urged me to speak, to stop this before it went any further, but my body remained still. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry, I turned my head to look at him, my heart pounding. His chest was just inches from me, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and desire that I couldn't ignore. Before I could speak, he closed the distance, his lips brushing my cheek in a fleeting, gentle touch that left me stunned. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaky but not from fear. "I don't know," he admitted, hesitating. I don't know." The air between us was thick with tension, the silence stretching like a taut thread. I wanted to say something to break it, but I was frozen, my mind racing too fast to grasp a single thought. David pulled back slightly, his expression a mix of shame and hopelessness. "Sorry," he whispered, his voice unsteady. "I shouldn't have done that. I'll go." Before I could respond, he disappeared into the shadows, leaving me alone with the weight of what had just happened. I don't think he realized. I didn't mind. I actually liked it. When he walked away, I knew I wanted more. I'd never felt this before, but for now, I decided to push it aside and ask him to stay with me again tomorrow. Then, maybe, we could talk about it. The next day, I couldn't focus. My thoughts kept drifting back to David. His hesitant touch, his quiet apology, the way his lips barely touched my skin. It was strange, overwhelming, yet impossible to forget. David avoided me all morning, staying in his room with the door shut. I didn't have the courage to knock. Maybe he needed time to process what happened, and honestly, so did I. As the day dragged on, the tension in the house grew unbearable. By afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I stood outside his door, my hand hovering just above the wood. For a second, I considered walking away, but then I knocked softly. "David?" I called, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can we talk?" A long pause followed before I heard footsteps. When he opened the door, he looked different, his usual guarded expression replaced by something softer, almost fragile. It made my chest ache. "Come in," he said quietly, stepping aside. I entered, glancing around. His room was neat and orderly, just like him, but there was an uneasy energy in the air. He motioned for me to sit on the bed, and I did, even though my nerves screamed at me to leave. "I just wanted to ask," I began after a moment, "about last night." He winced, shoulders tensing. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I know it was weird. I shouldn't have—" "David?" I interrupted, raising a hand. "It's okay. I'm not mad. I just need to understand what's going on, and I have something to tell you too." He hesitated, fidgeting with his hands, before finally admitting, "I don't know. I feel so alone without Mom. The house feels empty, even with you here." His words hit me harder than I expected. I'd always tried to be a good mother, but hearing him say he felt lonely hurt. "David, I'm sorry if I've made you feel that way," I said softly. "You're not alone, okay? I'm always here for you." He nodded, but his eyes stayed fixed on the floor. "I know, but it's not the same." "What do you mean?" I leaned forward slightly. He took a deep breath, clenching his fists. "It's hard to explain," he murmured. "I want to be close to you, but not in the usual way, and I don't know how to handle it." His confession hung heavily between us, raw and unfiltered, twisting my stomach into knots. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to dismiss it, to tell him it was just a phase, but another part, one I didn't want to acknowledge, felt drawn to him in a way I couldn't explain. "David," I started carefully, "I think you're confused. It's normal to—" "I'm not confused," he cut in firmly, his gaze locking onto mine with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. "I know how I feel, and I know it's not normal, but I can't help it." I tried to find the right words, but nothing came. Instead, we sat in silence, the weight of his admission pressing down on us like a physical force. I wanted to comfort him, to promise everything would be okay, but I didn't know how. This was unfamiliar territory, and I was completely lost. I hadn't told him how I felt yet, but what happened next would change everything. That evening, I tried to act normal. We ate dinner together, talking about small things, school, work, but the unspoken tension lingered, thick and unavoidable. Every time I looked away, I felt his eyes on me, sending a shiver through my skin, a mix of unease and something else I couldn't name. I meant to ask him to stay with me again, but when I tried, the words wouldn't come. Later, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the night wasn't over. Staring at the ceiling, my mind raced, replaying David's words, his voice so full of tenderness and longing it stole my breath. Finally, I got up and went straight to his room. He was still awake. "David," I whispered. At first, he didn't answer, yet I knew he had heard me. "David, would you like to stay with me tonight?" "Are you sure, Mother?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "I'd like that." He quickly climbed onto my bed, his weight making the mattress dip slightly. For a while, he just sat there, hands resting on his knees before reaching out to touch my arm. "Mother," he said softly, his voice trembling, "comfort me, like a father would." I stared at him, my mind screaming at me to stop this, to say something, anything to halt what was happening. But I couldn't. The look in his eyes and the raw emotion in his voice left me frozen. "David, this isn't—" I began, but he cut me off. "Don't," he whispered, tightening his grip on my arm. "Let me stay, please." I swallowed, my throat dry. Finally, I spoke, my voice shaking. We should talk about this in the morning." He nodded, a faint smile touching his lips, and murmured his thanks as he lay down beside me. A strange mix of emotions churned inside me, fear, guilt, and a disturbing sense of anticipation. I didn't know what was happening between us, but one thing was clear. This wasn't over. I turned, and our eyes met instantly. There was an undeniable tension between us. We both knew what was coming. I sat up abruptly, my mind racing. "This is wrong," I said, my voice trembling. "You need to go back to your room." "No," he said, his gaze locked onto mine. "I don't care if it's wrong. I can't pretend I don't feel this way anymore." Before I could respond, he reached out, his fingers barely brushing my cheek. The touch was soft, almost reverent, sending a shiver down my spine. "David," I pleaded, my voice unsteady, "this isn't—" He leaned in, his lips meeting mine in a kiss that was both hesitant and desperate. My mind screamed at me to stop, to push him away, but my body wouldn't obey. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The fear, the guilt, the absurdity of the situation. There was only David, his touch, his warmth, his need, and in that moment I couldn't pull away. The kiss lasted too long, far longer than it should have. His lips were gentle yet searching, filled with a deep longing to bridge the distance between us. My mind told me to end this, to pull back before things spiraled further out of control. But my body betrayed me, frozen in place, unable to move. When we finally broke apart, his eyes met mine, filled with fear, desire, and something dangerously close to hope. "David," I whispered, barely able to speak, "we can't. This isn't—" "I know it's wrong," he said, his voice shaking. "But I don't care. I can't keep pretending anymore, Mother. I can't hide how I feel." I shook my head in disbelief. "You're confused. This isn't real." "It is," he insisted, his gaze unwavering. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." His words hit me with overwhelming force, leaving me breathless and disoriented. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was mistaken, but the conviction in his voice and the raw honesty in his eyes made it impossible to deny that he truly believed what he was saying. "I don't know how to handle this," I admitted, my voice faltering under the weight of the situation. "I don't know how to fix it." "You don't have to fix anything," he said, reaching for my hand. His touch was warm, steadying. yet it made my pulse race against my better judgment. Just let me in. I pulled my hand away, my chest tight with fear and guilt. David, this isn't about what I want. It's about what's right. This is wrong. He looked down, shoulders slumping in defeat. I understand, he said quietly. But I know you don't really mean that, not entirely. His words hung in the air, heavy and unshakable, stirring an indescribable ache inside me. Was it guilt? Shame? Or the terrifying realization that part of me didn't want to push him away? In the silence that followed, something shifted, a sudden rush of heat. When I looked into his eyes, I think he saw it too. The tension between us changed, becoming about something entirely different from what we'd been discussing. His quick movements told me we'd both been feeling this way for days. That kiss had awakened something in me, something undeniable. After a silence that stretched too long, I spoke. Kiss me again, David. What? He said, startled. Go on, I whispered. Like you said, pretend you're father. I stopped holding back. Something inside me snapped, and suddenly I wasn't resisting anymore. David leaned in, and we kissed again, this time deeper, hungrier. As we did, his hands moved the way Charles's used to. It escalated quickly, from kissing to something far more intimate, and then it got much worse. I couldn't stop it. I didn't want to. I won't go into detail, but I can say this much. The experience was intensely emotional, delicate, and, from his viewpoint, somewhat harmful. Unknown to me, he had embraced his role as Charles with great seriousness, and I could tell from the way he pronounced my name. Afterward, we lay down, both unsure of what had just occurred. Are you all right, son? I asked. Yes, Mother, he replied. Don't worry about me. I just need to use the bathroom and then we can go to bed. That was the last moment I clearly recall. I think I drifted off while he was in the restroom. The next morning, I woke early, reflecting on what had happened the night before. I was halfway through my coffee when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Without needing to look, I knew it was David. His presence filled the room before he spoke. Good morning, he said softly, his voice unsure. I turned to face him, offering a small smile. Good morning. The coffee is on the counter. He nodded and went to pour himself a cup. We stood in silence for a moment, the tension palpable. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore and set my drink down. David, we need to talk. He froze, his shoulders tightening as he turned to face me. About last night, he whispered. I nodded. About everything, I responded. I need to understand what's going on between us. His gaze dropped to the floor. I don't know, he admitted. I feel like I've been hiding this for so long and I can't keep it in anymore. I know it's wrong, Mother. I realize that. But I can't control how I feel. His words struck me like a punch to the stomach. I wanted to correct him, to tell him that he couldn't possibly feel this way. But the look in his eyes told me this wasn't just a passing confusion or teenage doubt. It was a deep, real fear, and it shook me more than I was willing to admit. David, I said carefully, you need to understand that what you're feeling is complex. This isn't something we can just fix quickly. He nodded, his face troubled. I know, he murmured, but that doesn't make it go away. Oh. The room fell silent again, the weight of his confession hanging heavily between us. I wanted to comfort him, to tell him everything would be all right, but I wasn't sure how to proceed. I felt like I was walking a fine line. One wrong move could lead to disaster. The rest of the day was uncomfortable. David stayed in his room most of the time while I busied myself with chores and errands, but my thoughts kept drifting back to him. His gaze, so raw and vulnerable, it made my chest tighten. As evening came, I sat in the living room with a glass of whiskey when David walked in. He seemed hesitant, his hands in his pockets, but there was a look in his eyes that made my heart race. May I sit? He asked softly. I nodded, unable to say no. He sat down on the couch next to me, keeping a careful distance between us. Sorry, he said after a long pause. I didn't mean to make things so awkward. I just didn't know how to handle it. I know, I replied gently. It's all right. We'll figure this out. He looked at me, his eyes full of vulnerability that made my heart ache. Do you hate me? He asked, his voice barely audible. No, I answered quickly, placing my hand on his shoulder. I could never hate you, David. You're my child. He recoiled slightly at the word but didn't pull away. Instead, he softened, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in days. I just want to be close to you, he said, his voice trembling. I don't care how, I just need to be near you. His words broke something inside me, and I pulled him into a tight embrace as he buried his face in my shoulder. I'm here, I whispered. I'll always be here. For a brief moment, it seemed like we might be able to overcome this and restore our relationship. But as he pulled away and looked at me, his eyes filled with unshed tears, I felt the familiar tension creeping back in. Thank you, he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, for not abandoning me. My throat tightened, and I couldn't find the words. As he turned to leave, I reached out and stopped him. David, I said, my voice almost a whisper, we'll work through this together. He gave a small, hesitant smile that warmed my heart. I know we will, he said as he left, but I couldn't shake the feeling that our story wasn't over yet. The boundaries we had tried to set were already starting to blur, and while I wasn't sure what the future held, one thing was clear: things would never be the same again. Do you think my actions were wrong, considering I'm his mother? I'm uncertain. Please share your thoughts with me in the comments.